The United States of America and China are finally signing a new trade agreement today. China has made concessions and is ready to sell rare earth metals to the United States of America, but Xi Jinping still keeps an ace up his sleeve. And even the trade agreement being signed today is a little bit trimmed down. So let's discuss together in this episode the truly urgent news that China has such a valuable card it can play. Since today, China is holding trade negotiations with the United States, and both China and the United States are signing a new trade agreement. Let's take a look at what's hidden in it and how much better this trade agreement is compared to the one that existed before Trump started the trade war. My name is Alexei Pecci. Today is June 9th on the calendar. Let's go through everything step by step, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as soon as it comes in. So today, June 9th, a new round of trade negotiations between the United States and China began in London, during which both sides are maintaining this fragile truce that was reached with mediation last month. The new negotiations were announced last week after a long-awaited phone conversation between United States President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which apparently eased the tension that had arisen over the past month. After the unexpected agreement in Geneva, I remind you, a little over a month ago in Geneva, the Chinese and the Americans signed an interim trade agreement, but then it turned out that no one was really following it. In May, both sides agreed to sharply reduce tariffs on each other's goods. For the initial 90 days, the mood was optimistic, but attitudes quickly soured due to two major sticking points. This is China's control over so-called rare earth minerals and its access to semiconductor technologies coming from the United States of America. And now today, Beijing's export of rare earth metals and related magnets will become a central topic at the meeting in London. And sources from this meeting are already reporting that negotiations between the United States and China are still ongoing. At the time of recording this episode, they are still ongoing. And the official Chinese news agency Xinhua has reported that the negotiations may be prolonged. Experts say that Beijing is unlikely to completely give up its strategic control over key minerals that are essential for a wide range of electronics, transportation, and defense systems. In particular, experts say that China's control over rare earth metal supplies has become a calibrated but assertive tool of strategic influence. Its near monopoly over the supply chain means that rare earth metals will remain an important bargaining chip in trade negotiations. Some context is needed to understand the situation. The thing is, after the negotiations in Geneva, Trump accused Beijing of effectively blocking the export of rare earth metals, announcing additional restrictions on chips and threatening to revoke American visas for Chinese students. These steps provoked a negative reaction from China, which considers Washington's decision a failure to fulfill its trade promises. And here, on the one hand, Beijing seems to be right, but on the other hand, it's absolutely wrong. Because when Donald Trump imposed the first after back in April, Beijing responded by announcing that it was completely banning the export of a whole range of rare earth metals to the United States of America. And the whole issue is that China really has a monopoly on the extraction or processing of many such metals, which are needed, among other things, for the production of these very microchips. Electronics, electric vehicles in the space industry, they are used in the defense industry and so on. And China has a monopoly on all these metals, and China supplied them to Americans in quite large quantities. And Americans can't diversify the supply of these rare earth metals because there aren't that many of them. First of all, secondly, China has long taken over this niche, and now China says, we won't send you these rare earth metals. And Trump, of course, was very offended by this and said that, no, it turns out Beijing is violating the trade agreement. It is known that on the American side at these negotiations are the United States Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Commerce, Govard Ludnick, and the Trade Representative, Jameson Greer. They are meeting with the Chinese delegation headed by Vice President Haley Fena. Even on Saturday, Beijing sent such conciliatory signals, and a representative of the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, which oversees this export control, stated that it had approved a certain number of relevant applications. Quote, China is ready to further strengthen ties and dialogue with the relevant countries on export control issues to facilitate trade and meet requirements, but hinting that some amount of rare earth metals will still be sent to the Americans. But notice, he doesn't say that we are completely lifting the ban, just some amount. At the same time, the head of the National Economic Council at the White House, Kevin Hassett, stated on Sunday that the American side will strive to fully restore the flow of rare earth minerals. Next is his quote. The export of key minerals is being carried out at higher rates than before, but not as high as we, in our opinion, agreed upon in Geneva. I am quite satisfied with the conclusion of the trade agreement after the negotiations. And just this morning, that same Hassett stated the following: this was a very important stumbling block because China controls about 90% of rare earth metals and magnets. If they delay sending them to us because of some licensing deal they've made, it could potentially disrupt the production of certain American companies that depend on these things. And there are quite a few of them, for example, car companies. President Trump took this very seriously. He called President Xi and said that we need to release these things faster, and President Xi agreed. So basically, Hassett is saying that Trump admitted they are dependent on Chinese supplies. He called Xi Jinping and said that our production could stop. Let's make a deal. We urgently need these minerals. And here, let me remind you once again that in April, when trade tensions between the two countries escalated, China introduced a new licensing regime for 7 rare earth minerals and several types of magnets, requiring exporters to obtain a permit for each shipment that is sent and to provide documentation confirming the intended end use of these materials. So basically, it's a whole bureaucratic procedure that in fact stopped this export. After the trade truce reached in Geneva, the Trump administration expected China to lift the restrictions on all these minerals, but Beijing's obvious slowness with approvals caused deep disappointment in the White House. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 elements that are actually more common than gold, and they can be found in many countries, including the United States of America. It seemed like, well, they are everywhere, but they are very difficult and very expensive to extract, and they pollute the environment during mining and processing, and nobody wanted to get involved with that. China decided that there was good money to be made from this, and China agreed to mine and process them in their own country, even though it causes a lot of environmental pollution. And today, China controls 90% of the world's rare earth element processing. Experts believe that Beijing might try to use its influence over rare earth metals to force Washington to ease its own export controls, which are aimed at blocking China's access to advanced American semiconductors and related technologies. The American Chamber of Commerce in China stated on Friday that some Chinese suppliers to American companies have already received 6-month export licenses. That is, for now, they've been given the green light to supply rare earth metals to companies like General Motors, Ford, and Jeep Stellantis. So they've been given some kind of temporary licenses, but again, there's no certainty that they will be extended in 6 months. Meanwhile, while China could speed up the licensing process to ease this diplomatic tension, global access to Chinese rare earth materials will likely remain more limited than it was before April. And this is no longer speculation, this is already the conclusion of a London consulting company. They calculated that most likely Beijing realized that this is its Achilles heel. This is what can be used to put pressure and what can be appealed to. As it is written, Beijing has become more persistent in using export controls as a tool to protect and strengthen its global positions in strategic sectors. Even before Trump raised tariffs on Chinese goods this year. On the other hand, while China is waging a tariff war with the United States, it is becoming clear that disruptions continue to cause economic problems within the country. The trade and price data released today on Monday painted a grim picture for the country's export-dependent economy. According to data published by the General Administration of Customs of China, the total volume of foreign deliveries in May grew by only about 5% compared to the same month a year earlier. This is a sharp slowdown compared to the 8% recorded in April, and it is below the export growth estimate of exactly 5%. according to a survey of economists. Exports to the United States plummeted by nearly 35%. The sharp monthly decline continued with 21% in April, and it happened despite the trade truces announced on May 12th, as a result of which American tariffs on Chinese goods were reduced from 145 to 30%. Despite this, exports from China to the United States still dropped sharply. 34.5% is a serious figure. Nevertheless, a representative of the Chinese Customs Department, Liu Dalian, praised China's economic strength, stating in the state media Xinhua that China's trade in goods has demonstrated resilience in the face of external challenges. Meanwhile, deflationary pressure continues to haunt the world's second-largest economy. According to data published separately on Monday by the National Bureau of Statistics in May, China's Consumer Price Index, which serves as a benchmark for measuring inflation, fell by 0.1% compared to the previous month. And factory deflation, measured by the Producer Price Index, worsened, dropping by almost 3.5% in May. And the decline last month marks the rarest annual contraction in the past 22 months. So, overall, as you understand, this trade war has been a major blow for both the United States and China. Both countries are suffering from it. China has found that fine line where it can put pressure on the United States of America in order to eventually achieve a normal trade agreement. That's why today there will already be some final result, and we'll see what comes out of it. But in the White House, they are already openly stating that they are confident China will eventually unblock the supply of rare earth metals. But the Americans will most likely lower that very tariff on Chinese goods imported into the United States even further. And in fact, we might just return to the starting point, to where it all began. Why all of this was started is still completely unclear, I don't know. Donald Trump's team didn't understand that Xi Jinping has a card. As Trump says, he has cards in his hands. When it comes to rare earth metals, no one in the world is really involved in this, neither mining nor processing these metals. Come on, Keras, it's expensive, it's dirty, nobody wanted to deal with it, but the Chinese took it on. As a result, they control 90% of the entire market, so they are the monopolists in this market, and it was very strange to expect that they wouldn't take advantage of it. So I'll just leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. Also, if you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially by making any donation using the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the quick response code on your screens. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.